Morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Conway from Snyk. I'm the head of partner marketing, and thank you for joining us this morning or this evening, wherever you may be. I'd love to introduce our experts today who will be walking you through some great DevSecOps insights. You'll hear from Snyk, Atlassian, and Eficode, and we'll drill into how easy and seamless it is to embed security testing into your BitBucket workflow. Snyk is thrilled to have two of our amazing partners joining us today. Rich O'Connell, who's the head of product partnerships at Atlassian, will kick things off for us. We'll then hear from Cal Circusel at Eficode, and they are a partner both of Snyk as well as an Atlassian Platinum Solutions partner in Europe. Finally, we'll hear from our own Udi Amnashmani, who is the VP of Cloud Alliances, and he'll define what security for developers means and show you a demo of Dev-First Security and how it fixes more issues faster. So feel free to send some questions throughout. We'll address them as they come in, but we'll also have time at the end for a more in-depth Q&A discussion. And we will also be sending a recording, so look for that at the end of this call. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rich, who's going to kick things off and sort of set the stage for us. Rich, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Sarah. So if you want to go on to the first slide there. So my name is Rich and I work on the partnerships team here at Atlassian, and it's great to be with everyone today. I'm going to start with a short overview of how Atlassian thinks about DevOps and talk about why culture and practices go hand in hand with tools and platforms. For a quick overview of Atlassian, we were founded in Australia in 2002, and we now serve more than 170,000 customers and have over 4,500 employees. We're best known for our developer collaboration products like Jira and Confluence, but we now have a suite of ITSM solutions like Jira Service Desk, OpsGenie, and we recently acquired Help for help desks that run on Slack. Next slide, please. So Atlassian has grown with the agile developer movement. For almost 20 years, development as a profession has adopted the notion of agility at its heart. Agility guides the philosophies that encourage developers to test and learn and find new ways to deliver value quickly. Next slide, please. But as developer teams have increased in velocity and complexity, so has the world they work in. Teams today face increasing complexity, more distributed work, more overloaded, shorter deadlines, and work that moves across devices. Teamwork is hard and it's becoming increasingly complicated. Also, with the move to remote work, that complexity has also increased. As the amount of information proliferates and we use more and more data and information to drive decisions. As our markets and our competition moves faster, the expectation is that we'll be able to move fast too and deliver better results for our companies. And naturally, with the shift to mobile, our work basically follows us wherever we are. Next slide, please. So DevOps practices have developed to help teams deal with some of these challenges. DevOps promises modern software teams the ability to build, test, and ship faster and more reliably. And teams that are efficient at implementing DevOps have seen some good results. 61% of teams say it helps produce better quality work, and 49% say they can move faster than before implementing DevOps practices. Next slide, please, Sarah. But then there is also a large variation in the results that teams are seeing. What jumps out to me here is the big variance in these numbers. It's rare to see such large differences between the lowest and highest performers. So teams that get DevOps right can see 46 times more frequent deployment than their peers. They spend 20% less time on unplanned work, so they have more control over their work. And they can see over 2,000 times faster failure recovery. So DevOps is worth getting right. Next slide, please. But the other reality here is that developers end up having a lot more work to do than before. 44% of developers spend only 1 to 4 hours every day programming. Developers are now responsible for spending a lot of time learning new tools and switching between them, automation of CI, and reminding people to approve pull requests. In the areas of testing, DevOps promotes shifting left, but a large part of testing is still very manual. It's very hard to execute the entire test suite for every commit, making it a big barrier for continuous delivery. 52% of people said a large proportion of their testing was still manual, slowing them down. From a cultural perspective, DevOps changes the nature of work for developers. Faster releases mean more blurred lines between teams. Developers are now responsible for more than just building. They are also securing and operating software. Gartner predicts that by 2022, 75% of DevOps initiatives will fail to meet expectations due to issues around organizational learning and developer overload. And for security and ownership of application security, almost 50% of developers say they don't have enough time to spend here, even though they are aware of its importance. Next slide, please. So the last thing for me to cover today is a little bit on why culture is important. Despite the name, DevOps isn't really so much about reporting structures, it's about teamwork, even those teams that are ad hoc or informal. It's about giving these teams room to perform and a culture that supports their success. Atlassian surveyed 500 DevOps professionals and found that people and culture are the top factors in a successful DevOps implementation. You absolutely need the right tools, but without the right mindset, rituals, and culture, it's hard to realize the full promise of DevOps. Atlassian tries to automate away the drudgery by connecting dev and ops so your teams can shift left and accelerate team practices with these best-of-breed tool chains. You can empower team autonomy, collaboration, and visibility with cross-team insights and metrics, flexible tools, and built-in team practices. You can automate your workflow with scriptless rules, embedded security scanning, and automatic actions for incidents. And you can accelerate your team and break down silos with these best-of-breed tool chains. It's also worth noting that the most successful companies are on board with DevOps culture across every department and every level in the organization. They have open channels of communication and talk regularly. They assume that keeping customers happy is just as much product management responsibility as it is the development team's responsibility. They understand that DevOps isn't one team's job, it's everyone's job. Hopefully that was helpful, and now let me pass to Calais from Eficode. Thanks, everyone.
Hello. I get my screen sharing in order, and hopefully you can see my screen. And I will be getting started. So I'm Calais, as said before. I come from Eficode. In a nutshell, these slides will be shared. We are a very large Nordic DevOps company. We got Partner of the Year twice in DevOps, so we know something about it from Atlassian perspective. And we have many countries and very satisfied customers. But as I have a tight schedule, I will be continuing on the actual topic of DevSecOps, as you most likely don't care about Eficode that much, or you have heard of us. So previously we talked about DevOps and how DevOps is about integrating dev and ops together. Well, after getting amazing DevOps concept going, managers had hard time understanding how to bring the security into this and how to move fast with security involved. So we made a concept called DevSecOps, which is DevOps, but you have to actually do DevOps to do DevSecOps, and to do DevSecOps, you're doing DevOps. So what you're trying to do is that you're bringing the security very close to your development. You add tools such as static code analysis or security processes that can be implemented in the pipeline itself. So, for example, code reviews themselves are security practice because you are reviewing the other person's code. They can't do malicious code easily if you're already following it with the team. team carries the responsibility, not a single person. You're also doing security by doing code reviews, by having the team own the code and not just one person. So everybody knows what they're doing. It's also important to do certain things in DevSecOps, such as pipelines. They need to be secure. Well, if you're doing automatic deployments, you have an audit log on who did what and what got deployed and when did it get deployed. Automatically generated, no hassle. You can also remove many of the accesses that you would usually need for any of the bad practices because you're already doing it in the DevOps way. You can also prevent bad architectures by having stable templates. So if you are doing Terraform, for example, or ARM templates in Azure or CloudFormation in AWS, you can easily do it with have these templates that you share across the teams and avoid bad architectures. You can also type tests that cover basic use cases, such as login tests that can be covered multitude of times and multitude of places the same way. You can have integrated integration tests, so checking like basic databases and so on connectivities. And all of that increases your security, but at the same time makes developers' life easier. The ideology is to make everybody that is part of the process involved in the process. So bringing those great security practices to light and making them part of the development's everyday life. So what you should have is data to the team. So the team should have the data that they need, and the data should be accessible. You have to have available, like what are the DevSecOps metrics and what is happening. So I mentioned static code analysis, and we are talking today more about this binary analysis soon. But the ideology is that this data, if you don't have the data of security to the developers, they can't improve. So if you don't tell them that, hey, it's actually more secure if you deploy through the pipeline, and you should always go through the pipeline to fulfill this security requirement, the team is not going to do it because they don't know about it. The development practices should be easy. Like if you create these amazing templates, but nobody knows how to use them, well, nobody's going to use them. It's going to be like, yeah, we have these amazing templates, but it's too hard to use. I'm rather writing them myself. That happens with many of the open source products, for example, that you start out writing amazing templates and then you end up in a situation where nobody wants to use them because they don't feel easy. That can happen with your Jira process also. You make amazing process, but if the process feels heavy to the users, they won't be using it. You have to think about it from the user perspective, like how can I make them use it without them jumping out and having like their own shadow ID, for example. Every time you think about like DevSecOps, it should be there to help the development work. It shouldn't be there to hinder it or slow it down, because then the developers will skip it or remove it. That's what happens for automatic tests. So, for example, I had a team of university students that I was coaching during the Corona autumn, and they were working, they had nice tests. We kept them a workshop on how to write tests, and they wrote a bunch of tests. And I come to the second last sprint and I code reviewed their code, and well, you can guess it. They removed all the tests because none of them worked, because they didn't have time to upkeep them. So I declined on accepting the pull request because they have to write the tests. But it was something that as soon as it became a pain to upkeep, the developers tried to dodge it. And you have to make sure that they feel that it is useful. So what ended up happening is that we talked and went through like how to make the tests more usable and easy, and it helped them start working on them. And most importantly, don't make it feel like pain. Like if you add processes, don't add pain to the developers. 10, to the actual process. So we've now talked about the terminology, DevSecOps. It's about co-working. It's about working together. It's about pushing things together with the best practices. Well, next up, we talked about having the data available so that the team knows what they're doing. And then we're going to start about tools. So usual development pros drawn here without the developer. The developer would be somewhere around here next to the BitBucket, and they would push code to the BitBucket. And then stuff starts to happen, as you can see. We have a CI/CD Bamboo in this case. It would push to static code analysis, and it would push to JFrog's Artifactory, and all of that would be monitored by Snyk, and it would create pull requests to BitBucket. And I forgot to draw a line, and SonarQube would also do pull requests to BitBucket. And that way, you would end up having the security reports from Snyk with the static code analysis and or static binary and dependency analysis, and from SonarQube from the static code analysis. This creates you a secure way of working where the developer never leaves BitBucket. It also makes it faster for the developer to work on it, because when they do a pull request, for example, it automatically gets checked with Snyk, with SonarQube, and with Bamboo that everything works, and it tells you, hey, these are the things that you need to fix before we can approve this pull request. It helps the developer, it's seamless, and it actually makes it easier because you don't have to jump through all these tools, because you have integrated all of them into the BitBucket. And this way, you get the vulnerable components checked and fixed. You get the static code, such as hard-coding passwords, checked and fixed. And you get also the code reviewed at the same time. It saves you a lot of time in many aspects. So I promised a demo. So I will have a short demo on how this all works. So this is the root portal. And from here, we will be going to BitBucket. I have it already open here. And here we have a demo that I have. And in this demo, I have been writing some vulnerable code. And it gets analyzed by our BitBucket pipeline. And then we can open a pull request back here. And it helps us tell, hey, there is vulnerable code in BitBucket. We can also integrate it with BitBucket pipelines, Bamboo, Jenkins, whatever you want. And we can also integrate it with the Artifactory. Ideology being that you want the integration to be easy. And that's what Snyk has done very well. The automation was one of the easiest that I have worked with. So here it's the Snyk demo from our side. And I have a few demo projects here that I have been bringing in. And I'll first show you how the integration works. So a lot of integrations, BitBucket Server, BitBucket Cloud, GitLab, and so on. But like most importantly, BitBucket and BitBucket pipelines, Jenkins, and the client. So if there is something that is not supported, you can always do it with the client. So you can use Snyk client and run commands with it. And that comes in Docker image, for example. And you can use the Docker image to run these commands very easily. So for example, you have some Node.js code that you want to analyze very fast. You could do it from your own machine to see, are we anyway secure to do a proof of concept? You would download the Snyk client Docker image and run it with this command, fixing few paths and so on. Easy to do. Well, how does it work with the BitBucket then? Well, I'm going to go with BitBucket Server, but there is also a cloud version. And in here, I have connected BitBucket and BitBucket Server. And you could take a repository and you could select it and it gets scanned. What happens in the background is that I have connected my API token, which is my token for BitBucket. And I have connected it with the BitBucket instance that we have in public internet. And I have enabled it to do pull requests there with my token by following the documentation, and allowed it to do this pull request automatically and tell us that, hey, there is a security patch that you need to work on. This requires your BitBucket instance to be in public internet, but there are private accesses available. Then we have BitBucket Cloud. The same thing. You create these tokens and you define them, and you can bring your code from there and add the selected work to be scanned. One click, everything is happening automatically. No need to figure out what's going on. So let's go to our report very quickly to show that it has scanned one of the projects that I have brought, and it shows these vulnerabilities. Then it would open the pull request, and I would get information on what is wrong. I opened the wrong project. Sorry. I have too many projects here. But let's say we would want to open this project. So we would open a fixed pull request on that, and I would fix the pull request, and it starts collecting the information how to fix it and automatically makes me fixes. I can also enable it to automatically create these. And Judy, after me, is going to tell you a lot more about how does it analyze it and what happens with the analysis on these things. Then, if you want to do artifactor scanning, you can also do the artifactor integration. I hope my internet didn't break. I have been having internet problems. Well, Sarah doesn't, I don't hear her. I hope it works. Yep.
We see your screen changing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Because the Snyk is spinning, so I'm a bit afraid of, because I have had 2 internet connection breakdowns today already. Okay. Let's go to BitBucket because I feel more safe here. So if you want to do, so back to my demo. So now I have connected. Okay. I want to just fix one thing. Right. So the problem is that it wants to fix everything, and I just wanted to show you quickly about it. So we have a bit too many things here. But you would press the open BitBucket pull request, and it starts opening it and sends it to my BitBucket instance. Hopefully it will work. Demo effects might be in order because I didn't find my projects. Well, addition to this, I was talking about the SonarQube integration with BitBucket. Yeah, as afraid there is the Jackson XML doesn't actually have, all of them don't have fixes, and some of them can't be upgraded because of that. And there is few other things that are still in progress to these certain projects, but most of these things work. There is just could not be applied to upgrade because there is no good upgrade to it. Sorry, bad demo, but yeah, that happens, and then you need to debug and go through the analysis when that happens. You get email if you have the automatic running, and you get the details. But what it actually ends up looking is very similar to this one, where you have the pull build. So you have the builds that have been run if you have builds related to that pull request. And then you have the details on what broke. And now this is from, if I go back to my picture, take it slow, I have time. If I go back to here, so that's how Snyk and BitBucket discuss with each other, how Bamboo and Snyk talk to each other was explained via that. And Artifactor is the same integration. There is a direct integration with Artifactor and Snyk for Docker images. So then if you want the SonarQube version, for me, it's automatically done in my code. So if I do a build, it automatically gets done. So I have a sonar scanning step, which gets run, and it runs it on every branch and pull request. And then it returns back and informs me what is broken to my code review. And it shows it in here on the code that, hey, there is a bug. And it gives me a picture of the bug and a link to the SonarQube. And also the severity of the bug. So once again, everything is coming to your BitBucket. The normal developer doesn't need to come to the instance. They rather work in BitBucket. This way, it's a lot more strong and it's a lot faster to notice, because most developers will not leave their BitBucket instance, or they don't want to leave the code review. Yeah. And that is a very short demo of integrations. Judy will be going through more in detail what do the numbers in Snyk side mean, but it is very, very simple to get started. You can scan your whole instance in minutes. Well, it takes a bit longer for the scanning, but you can get every detail to your reports very fast. So how to get started? This is in all my slides. So how do I get started in the DevSecOps itself? So you start by adding the pull requests for your team to review each other's code, because you will be needing those for all of these things to work. If you're not used to going and checking the code reviews, it will be hard for you to check, hey, oh yeah, there is a code review open. It's not gonna work. Rather, it needs to be built in that, hey, we are working every morning. You start by checking the code reviews and going through each other's code. Then you add the automation of build status, for example. So you have these build statuses coming in, so you get some automation running, but it's not that big yet. You know that, hey, my build is going through. So you have some continuous integration going on and you get some build status. It doesn't even need to be like, it can just be linter running in the back behind, but you get this detail of people starting to notice these checks that you need to do. Then you add the static code analysis because it's really fast to do. And then you do the code vulnerability scanning, because if you're in the beginning of a project, it's very easy. If you're in the longer term of the project, it's going to be a bit harder because you have a lot more dependencies already, and the vulnerability addition is a lot harder. Versus doing the SonarQube scanning, that's the same thing. Like, the earlier you add both of these, the less pain it's going to be, because you're already in good shape. You don't have that much legacy code. If you have a lot of code, then you have to go through and analyze which are actually affecting this project and which are you acceptable risks, because the amount of problems that you end up getting is a whole lot bigger. Hopefully Judy will go through with you how to analyze the vulnerability scanning. Then we do some automatic testing. So very basic automatic testing with robot framework or comparable acceptance testing framework, where we can create these basic tests that check your basic security. For example, that authentication works with username and password and not with username and empty. Very easy to do this mistake, but very important to check. And after this, you can add some more like packet checking or more security related things. But one thing that I want to mention every time is that even with all of these tools and even with all of this automation that we've been adding, you should still hire those professional security people and auditors, etc. Because when you do all of this, they actually have to go through and figure out how your code works and break it, and they will still find vulnerabilities most likely. These are known vulnerabilities, and then there are those that, oh, I actually managed to do it with jumping in and stealing your cookie or something like that. Usually stealing cookie is prevented by already having these security measures in place, but you know what I'm talking about. Those very weird, how did this happen? Things can be found by professional security people very easily. Well, not easily, but you get what you pay for at that point. And that would be my 20 minutes. And if you have any questions, I will be waiting for them at the end. And I will throw it to Judy, I think. Or I throw it to Sarah.
Thank you.
I think we're all set, Cal.
Yeah, we good?
Good. Okay.
Thank you very much, Carl. So I'm just going, so good afternoon, I guess, for most of you, if you're based in Europe like me. So like was said before, my name is Judy, and I'm going to kind of walk you through first of all, taking a step back, looking at what is so challenging about the cloud native stage or phase that we are in terms of security and development, and one way to approach it that fits well with what Rich and Carl were talking about. So not to spend too much time here, but I work for Snyk. I've been in tech in startups and big companies for a while. I've been lucky enough to be involved in cloud native from the early days of Kubernetes and cloud. And feel free to get in touch with me later on Twitter or LinkedIn if you want after the webinar. So a bit about Snyk, for the company. We're going to be 5 years old in July, so happy birthday to us soon. We have about 400,000 users on our free tier, so we have a generous free tier for open source applications, and about 400 paying customers, companies as well. On top of that, you can see some of the names on the right-hand side. We mainly have two platforms. The first one, Snyk open source, looks at open source vulnerabilities and license issues you're pulling into mostly to your Git, and then adding automation in the processes after that. And Snyk Container does the same for containers, looks at container images in the registries, as well as monitoring Kubernetes clusters, all from a developer point of view, and I'll explain what that means. So again, let's think about this buzzword of digital transformation. We like to break it down into three things that are happening. The first thing is there is much more software, right? Mark Andreessen said almost 10 years ago, software will eat the world, or is eating the world. And what does that mean? And the second thing is cloud technologies. They're different from the technologies that came before them in terms of their nature and their speed and their scale. And then the third thing, going back to Rich's original point, DevOps. What does that mean? And what does that mean for this topic? So since we're all spending a lot of time quarantined these days, so I think when we can get out, the first thing a lot of us want to do is to meet our friends. So I'll take an example of what more software means in that context. So here's me after quarantine. I emerged out of that happy and healthy, and I want to have my friends over. However, I do have neighbors that care about noise, and I do have the city and the police that don't want any trouble. So I'm just going to bring my friends over and invite them because I know that they're reliable and they're polite. The problem, it starts when my friends bring their friends, and when their friends bring their friends, and I've lost control over the quality of the audience and over my ability to guarantee a quiet, calm, neighborhood-friendly party. And that's essentially what's happening today with open source and software. And when I mean open source and software, it doesn't matter if the end application is proprietary or open source. In the end, most of it will be open source. That is mainly historically for a reason of cost. It's cheaper to do, or it's free to do in most cases. It's also more efficient because instead of building something I can reuse. The problem starts if you think about my friends at the party. I thought I was bringing in 3 files, and I thought my application had 80 lines of code. The truth is that hidden in those lines of codes, hidden in those direct dependencies, are many, many more indirect or transitive dependencies that I wasn't even aware of. And in aggregate, if I sum everything up, I have many, many more lines of code than I could ever review in a reasonable way within my team. So obviously I need help. You see some stats on the right-hand side. A lot of application code is open source. We've said that. And also the vulnerabilities are increasing as well, at least doubling in the last 2 years. So this is not just a theoretical risk, but it's a real risk. And most of that risk is found, again, in the indirect dependencies. Going back to the second point, what is new about cloud technologies? Effectively, they're making everything software, which is the bit in orange here. So going from a pre-cloud era where developers kind of were in a good place to manage a small part of the stack, today everything is software defined. Developers have access through APIs and other mechanisms to a lot more than they used to. And this could be very scary for a lot of more traditional organizations trying to make this transition. So it's really changing the scope of the application. The application itself, it's much more than the code. It's configuration, it's the container image, it's any kind of package services, etc. And this is obviously a challenge, and how do we control that? And the third point about DevOps, DevOps is great. It removes silos, it keeps everybody in the loop. However, security is often kind of left behind because they need their gates and they need their critical delivery path, say pass or fail. And that is not something developers always want to do or can always do in the speed that they want. As a result, oftentimes we see security teams out of the loop, which results in insecure applications. Some of them, get to the headlines for sure. And then there's a talent shortage. All of a sudden, I need a much bigger number of people on my security team, and just trying to hire people that know about containers and serverless and all those things is virtually impossible. So there's almost no choice but to go to something we call dev first security, developer first security. So it's really about as security, making sure that we build developer-friendly solutions all along the software delivery lifecycle. And this is a great example with a bunch of Atlassian tools that I'll show in a second. So really catching issues in the IDE all the way to the left. And then, looking at the repositories and fixing into the branch, blocking builds if they're insecure into CI/CD, and then looking at production. And as soon as an issue arises, alerting the developer to fix the issues so they don't have to wait for security to shut down their workload. So that's kind of the principle. And let's go into a quick demo to follow up on Carla's demo. So the dashboard you've seen, and I think the integration, that's pretty clear how I add. So you can see there's source control like BitBucket Cloud and Server. There's also a bunch of registries that are supported for Snyk Container. We will talk a bit about Kubernetes. I can add a lot of integrations. BitBucket Pipeline is one. Notifications. I'll talk about Jira as well through the demo very briefly. Let's look at an example. So I have my projects here. I've opened these tabs to not rely on the Wi-Fi too much. And if I look at my Goof application, which is a demo application, so it's going to look pretty bad if the Wi-Fi allows. Yeah, there we are. So Snyk is telling me a bunch of things here. So first of all, it's telling me I have 44 vulnerabilities in this JavaScript app, but they're coming through 77 paths. What does that actually mean? That is Snyk building a very detailed dependency tree for me and telling me that, hey, maybe I thought that EJS local was safe, but actually in it is this package which is tagged as high severity. Or I thought error handler was safe because I also know the maintainers that are in charge of accepts, but actually there's a negotiator here, and actually it appears here more than once, sometimes direct, sometimes indirect. The good thing is if I fix the direct, if I fix the first level, then I fixed them all. So it's a very efficient way, a very intelligent way to look at vulnerabilities rather than just giving me a big number that I have without a map, if you will. So I can see this came from BitBucket Cloud. I'm just looking at the manifest file. I'm not looking at the source code. So this is a great complement to a SaaS tool like SonarQube. And then let's look a bit at the issues tab, right? So on the left-hand side, I have a bunch of filters, right? In this case, I only have 44 vulnerabilities. Many of our customers, they have vulnerabilities in the thousands and 10,000s. So obviously that's very challenging to prioritize. So these come in very handy. I can look at high, medium, low severity. I can filter out license issues and just focus on vulnerabilities. I can also look at, hang on, you know what? I'm just going to look at stuff that I know can actually be exploited out in the wild, right? So this might bump up medium severity vulnerabilities that can be exploited now. So I should really take care of them now rather than wait. So there's a lot of ways to cut this cake and keep things prioritized. I also have, if I look at the card for this vulnerability, npm conf, so it's high severity, the exploit is mature, that's why it's flagged all the way to the top. It also has this priority score that we've put together, kind of a weighted average of different factors. So we don't just rely on the kind of NVD rating of high, medium, low. We add some intelligence behind it to give a more rounded variable. So there's some basic information here. Where was this introduced from? What is the remediation? And if I really, if I know this is a vulnerable module that affects many projects and not just mine, and I don't want to touch it right now because the CIO said that they're on top of it, or we have something that we have to ship right now and we can't touch this, I can always create a Jira issue for the teams to say, hey, I've noticed this thing, I know I'm not supposed to touch it, or maybe it's the responsibility of another team. So it's very easy to build this into a Jira workflow. If I'm a security-minded developer or a security stakeholder, so I can even learn more about this issue. And this is really for the security geeks. this is where Snyk Intel, our proprietary vulnerability database, comes in and gives me a ton of information, a ton of context. Those of you who know NVD advisories and you know how little information and context there is sometimes, would appreciate this. It's also very friendly to even to the developer to dig in and look at this information. You probably noticed that there's a button here, open a fixed pull request. I can open pull requests for one or for all of them. I can also do this through the remediation tab. So if I do that, I'm not going to go through with the whole process. I'm just going to show you the next screen. So I can fix any or all of the issues that have a fix. Usually that's an upgrade or a patch that's available from the maintainers. Where there is no upgrade or patch from the maintainers, Snyk has come up with precision patches. So we create these ourselves for these issues here with a partial fix, and some issues that don't have a fix. So I'm not going to change my license right now across my whole app, but it's telling me there's something here that you should take care of because your compliance team has flagged GPL 2.0 as a license we should stay away from. So that's kind of what it looks like. But again, I'm not going to do that in detail. And then we talked about, so the developer is the main user of the Snyk tool, but it's very important to keep engineering managers and security people in the loop. That's where reporting comes in. So again, I'm doing pretty badly in terms of the number of security issues I have and how long I'm keeping them open. And this is because it's a demo app, so that's perfectly fine. More interesting if I woke up and looked at a newsletter in my inbox and I saw that there's a new CVE that's been uncovered, and I want to know if it's affecting any of my projects. So for example, let's say it's this one. So I can really easily, if the Wi-Fi cooperates, look at which projects are affected, and then open a Jira ticket, get in touch with the teams that are in charge of these projects. So as a security person or someone outside of the immediate team, that's a very good tool to have because it allows both the insight and also allows me to take action without breaking anything. Same goes for dependencies and for licenses. Let's say the legal team said, you know what, MPL is evil. We cannot have anything that has MPL. I don't mean to say anything about MPL. This is just an innocent example. So I see there's 20 dependencies across 15 projects, and then I can really size up my risk and talk to the relevant teams to fix this. So that's kind of a demo of Snyk open source, and I'll just do a couple of minutes on on two more features here. One is a Snyk container. So again, I can look at Docker images, container images, and what this tells me is, and these are big numbers, but if you know containers, then you know that this is reality. There's a lot of vulnerabilities here, but it's essentially the same screen. It's very friendly. I can also do this with a command line. What Snyk container is also telling me is, there's a bunch of options here to rebase the image. So I can use stable or latest, for example, and just choose my security posture across these. And none of these are perfect. Even, Buster Slim has around 50 vulnerabilities. But again, it's better than nothing. However, I do need to remember that it's not it's a minor upgrade. So I have options here, and I can then rebase the image very easily. What I also have here is both. So in this case, I don't, but in case there are vulnerabilities within the image that are flagged as application vulnerabilities, I'll have a second line here below host packages that shows vulnerabilities. The last example, we've talked about Kubernetes. So Kubernetes, one of the challenges with it is the native API is exposed to developers, and the Kubernetes config file is a very powerful way to impact the organizational IT and the application itself. So again, I'm looking at the Kubernetes configuration file, and Snyk is telling me there's no problem here from a privilege point of view, but there's a number of other problems that I, the developer, can take action on very early before I get in trouble with my security team. So it's a very similar UI across all the different experiences. This is all powered by Snyk Intel, our proprietary database. And when I say proprietary, I mean we also disclose our own vulnerabilities. We do our own research, and that's a very powerful tool that underlies both Snyk open source and Snyk container. So to summarize all of that, right, so that ties in well to the Atlassian workflow with BitBucket, find and fix with BitBucket, and also with Code Insights. Monitoring, monitoring, again, you can monitor the repository to make sure that when new vulnerabilities are introduced, you are catching them on time. Tracking with Jira tickets, we saw that. And of course, gating with BitBucket pipelines. I can, as a security person or even a DevOps person, I can say high severity vulnerabilities should not go into build, and that I can really easily add that automation into my workflow, even after developers have gone into BitBucket and Code Insights and fixed vulnerabilities. So with that, I want to say thank you. Just hopefully that made you think about the open source usage and risk in your teams, and not in a way of making you afraid, but in an opportunity approach that this can be solved quite easily and effectively. And then of course contact Eficode and Snyk for any more information. So I'm going to hand back to Sarah.
Great, thank you, Udi, and our other guest speakers. We did have a question come in, and that was related to high compliance environments, how this would work and what are the options if cloud applications aren't something that's permitted, and what can be done to achieve DevSecOps in those types of environments.
So I can answer for the Snyk part of it, and maybe Carl and Rich, you want to complete the answer. Snyk itself is SaaS first, but has a self-hosted option for those use cases, and also let's call it a hybrid option where you install a broker behind the firewall to talk to your BitBucket server, for example, while connecting to your tenant in the cloud on Snyk itself. So those options exist. Snyk runs on Kubernetes, so it's quite not very difficult to replicate.
Yeah, I can go, or do you want Chris first?
Just very quickly, from an Atlassian cloud perspective, we have been consistently rolling out adherence to a number of the leading standards and compliance frameworks, and we continue to actively invest there. So ideally, over the next kind of 6 months to 18 months, we should have the majority of those covered, which will also be helpful.
Yep, and Eficode, of course, is there to help you in the necessities if you need to run it in high compliance. Yes, we are very used to banking and so on requirements.
Great. I know, Cal, you had a great slide in your portion where you did talk about getting started with DevSecOps, and I think Udi, demonstrated how easy it can be to fold security in. But I'm wondering, there is a question related to the costs on getting started. If you can maybe touch on that part of the equation.
So Udi had a better information, as he had heard a coworker talking about this yesterday. So I'll let Udi answer. I have good answers also, but Udi's answers sound really amazing.
Sure. So again, Snyk is free for open source, but if you're running Snyk, for example, for proprietary applications, then obviously there's a license cost to it. However, the bit of information that Carla is referring to is something I saw yesterday in a talk where we're running DevSecOps in parallel, and Tanya Janka, who's a hacker, was presenting some stats from the Ponemon Institute of Research, and I think it was something like a flaw in code costs about $80 or 80 euros, let's say, to solve in dev. It goes up by 3 if you catch it at build. It goes up to around 1,000 if you catch it in QA and security gates. And of course, if you're fixing something in production, that goes into the thousands, something like $7,000 or euros. So I think that's another way to look at, cost of getting started. It's what is the cost that we're already paying that we're not aware of, and how could we make our organization much quicker, much safer, more secure, and also more efficient.
Great. Cal, anything that you wanted to add on that question?
No, it was mostly we were talking about this very same topic before the talk about because there is a conference going on. From my point of perspective, as said, it's very cheap to get started on beginning. And for example, SonarQube is open source also, and you can start static code analysis easily for free. Well, you have to still install and so on, but you can get started very minimal viable pricing, let's say that way. It's not going to cost you thousands of euros in the beginning, so you can get started.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And thank you everyone who joined either late in their day or early starting in the morning. And as I said, we will be sending out the recording, and we encourage you to share that and just check back in, and we'll be in touch with more resources and insights to help you on your DevSecOps journey. And thank you everyone for joining us today.